I don't want no oil, no spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I am, yes, once again here with my co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Rebecca Wood, thanks.
Yay.
She's emerged from the forest of technical difficulties, and she's back into the light of this wonderful show that we call For a Green Future.
For a Green Future. Really hope so.
Yeah, well, so far so good.
Yes.
So For a Green Future is a show, as you know, Rebecca, where we talk about ecology and the environment. We talk about how they affect people's lives, their wealth, their health, their happiness, the lives of their families and their friends and their pets. And we try to do it with a little bit of humor, and we try to do it with some panache, I think. And we have a really great show lined up for everybody today. We have a guest, a special guest, a very special guest, Lois Gibbs. And those of you who are at all familiar with the environment and the environmental movement know that this is a giant in the environmental movement. And she's going to be talking a little bit starting around 8:15. It's a pre-recorded interview. But you can call in at any time at 866-240-1065. And please do, on any kind of environmental question or topic. And I wanted to start out the show today talking about a situation where, as you know, we are, as most people are, we're locked down, we're in our houses, and you know, Rebecca, when we do the show normally at the station, I like to come in a little early sometimes, and I like to take the elevator up to the observation deck, you know, so you can just stand up there and holding onto the rail, and the wind is in your hair, and you're looking out over Toledo and all the way over to the lake, and you just get this sense that you're about to do something amazing. And it's a lot harder to do that when you're just sitting at your living room in front of your computer the way we are. Or
staring at did you fix the hole in the roof yet from the giant stack of quarters, Joe?
Yes, from our demonstration of exponential growth 2 weeks ago. Yeah, the ceiling's all patched up. You know, the quarters are all, distributed. We're everything's back to normal here. But
I was worried about that.
Yeah, that was quite a show. And, people can go back and look at our YouTube, just see, just how big that stack of quarters got. It's pretty amazing.
Exponential growth.
Yes. And so that's what we're trying to avoid, of course, by quarantining ourselves and keeping ourselves in our living rooms. But I have noticed something, though. The first 3 weeks or so into this lockdown, my wife and I live on Main Street in Bowling Green, and we have, for the first 3 weeks or so, we noticed a definite drop-off in traffic. It was down to less than half the normal, and it was wonderful because my wife and I could actually, for a change, sit on our huge front porch, and it was comfortable because normally the traffic noise just drives you inside after a few minutes. But But in the last week or so, I've noticed the traffic was getting almost all the way back up to normal, that it was almost constant traffic, and I was wondering what's going on here. Most businesses are still closed. Bowling Green State University is still closed. And so I asked people on Facebook, are you guys just getting in your cars and driving around?
Right.
And yes.
Yeah.
Dozens and dozens of people have told me on Facebook, yeah, that's what we're doing. We're stir crazy. We're just getting in our cars and driving around, sometimes for a couple hours. And
Wow.
the reason given being that gas prices are so cheap and people are going crazy in their houses. Unfortunately, driving a car around causes pollution.
Yes, it does.
In the 3 weeks where everybody was pretty much just sitting at home, and before this car breakout thing, the air was incredibly clear and clean, and you'd go for a walk, you could take really deep breaths. But now, and that's still true when it's like cloudy or not a nice day, but we had that really nice day. I think it was Thursday or Friday, it must have been, and I noticed that on the horizon, that sickly yellowish gray haze that covers so much of Ohio. And I realize so many people are getting in their cars now and just driving around that they've brought the pollution back. So now we still have a lockdown out of the cars. So it's not like they're driving to work. It's not like they're driving to hang out with friends and stuff. There's no good excuse for it. They're literally just getting in their cars and burning gas.
And it's Northwest Ohio. Exactly what do they think there is to see scenically?
That's a good question. I mean, farm fields.
Mostly cornfields, yeah.
They're yeah, there's no corn yet. There's just bare dirt.
No,
so dirt.
There's fields,
there's
right.
dirt to look at. Yeah.
When they have that stubbly thing going on, yeah.
So give us a call at 866-240-1065. 866-240-1065 anytime during this hour, and let us know, are you one of these joyriders? Are you one of these people that you just have to drive, that you just can't give it up? And hopefully Rebecca and I can counsel you a little bit. I mean, Rebecca, you don't go out and just drive around, right?
No, but I'm getting out at least twice a day 'cause dog.
Well, there you go. That's the thing. You're out walking about.
Right.
That's great. Yeah, walking,
and
biking. Yeah, go ahead.
Occasionally you'll see people walking around without masks, but they don't actually chase you down mostly if you have one on and you move across the street to the other side. So that works out.
Yeah. Well, I'm noticing out here though there are some people that are it's like they're deliberately trying to violate the whole personal space thing. It's like they'll come to the middle of the trail as you're approaching just to sort of prove, hey, I don't do what anybody tells me, even if it makes sense and protects other people.
Yeah.
Well, here. Go ahead.
I live in the city, so we kind of, we steer clear of strangers anyhow.
That's true. There's a cultural difference there. Yeah.
We don't know what the deal is with that person who's walking towards us. We'd rather not find out in many cases.
Right. Well,
but we give them a big friendly hi to make clear that we are friendly and not afraid of each other.
Yeah, we do that too. I mean, Carol and I will be walking down the trail. Somebody will be coming. It's like they get about 20 feet away, and we go, masks on. We put our masks on.
Yeah, there we go.
But then we wave and smile, they can't tell we're smiling. But then we wave and, like you say, cheery hi, just so that they know that we're not, we're not just being antisocial. We're putting that mask on for their good. So
there we go.
Okay, this is Joe. I have to break in. Unfortunately, Carol and I were looking at a webcam. We're going to start talking about Santa Monica Beach. And the webcam that we were watching was not live, even though it looked like it was on the webpage. So the pier, Santa Monica Pier, the amusement park there, is closed and has been closed since March 16th. But when I did this recording, I was under the impression that it was still open. So about to do a lot of talking about something that actually didn't happen. But these things happen in live radio. So back to the recording. Carol actually showed me some webcams of California, and there was a beach down there in California, and the beach wasn't too heavily populated. There were some people on the beach, but the camera panned all the way over, and there was a amusement park right on the beach, and the parking lot of that amusement park was packed, and there were all kinds of people in there, and the Ferris wheel was going, the roller coaster was going, and Carol and I were saying, well, obviously it's because roller coasters are inherently sterile. They can't carry viruses, right? Even if the person in the
It's the velocity just sort of wipes the germs right off, right?
Right, that's right. Yeah.
We should not say this stuff because people do crazy stuff, since they're actually injecting bleach. Because some idiot said that on television.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, I was being sarcastic.
We were being sarcastic. We're up front.
Yes, I'm not pretending to be sarcastic. I actually was sarcastic. Roller coasters are not virus-free.
No.
Not inherently sterile.
No.
So it just looks like people are breaking ranks, and I have to ask, are you, our listeners, are any of you the ones breaking ranks, or are you still doing your best to stay isolated to prevent that terrible disease from still growing exponentially? The problem is, yes, we've slowed the progress, but at this point, not enough people have caught the disease, and so if we just start acting normally again, the exponential growth will take off, and we'll start dying by the thousands instead of right now we're dying by the dozens. And, it's not great that dozens and dozens of people are dying every day in Ohio, but it's a lot better than 1,000 a day. And there's nothing inherently about Ohioans that make us immune to this COVID. It's not like New Yorkers are sort of sickly, but Ohioans are healthy. No, it's simply that we have not had as many exposures as the people in New York City had. That's the only reason our numbers are lower, and as long as we continue to isolate, that will stay true. But as soon as we open everything up, that will no longer be true.
Well, it'll be after 2 weeks. 2 weeks after we open everything up, it'll be a disaster.
Yeah, 2 weeks after, the numbers will start increasing exponentially again. And our guest in our pre-recorded interview we're going to go to in just a minute, Lois Gibbs, she explains one of the sort of mysteries about this. That the news has reported that this disease is affecting people of color. It's affecting black people and Hispanic people at much higher rates than the white population, but they don't give any explanation for that. They just toss that out there, and it's not that people who are black or people who are Hispanic are somehow inherently more susceptible to this virus. That is not it at all. It's that the environments that they live in create other health problems, and that predisposes them to get more seriously affected by COVID when they catch COVID. And Lois Gibbs is going to explain a little bit about that. She is just a person that I have been in awe of since I was about 18, because way back in 1980, during the presidential election, there was what we call the Love Canal incident. Love Canal, New York, it's a neighborhood in Niagara Falls, New York. They discovered that their houses had been built upon a toxic waste dump, and they were dying. The entire families were getting cancer. Children were getting leukemia at incredible rates. Everyone who went to the school in that neighborhood, almost everybody, all the children had some kind of terrible disease. And the people, very slowly, they came to figure out that their houses had been built on top of a toxic waste dump that was literally, it was just a canal back from the canal days that Hooker Chemical filled with every kind of toxic chemical imaginable, and then just covered over with some dirt. And then they sold the land and people built houses on it. And this was a terrible tragedy, and it was a national scandal. And what Lois Gibbs managed to do in 1980 in that presidential election was make it a presidential issue in all the debates. People would talk about Love Canal and the nation's toxic waste problem. And she managed to actually get Jimmy Carter to come to Love Canal, and the Democratic-controlled Congress at that time created something called the Superfund, and that was used to clean up toxic waste dumps all over the world, all over the country. And the Republicans have since done their very best to gut the Superfund, but it is still having some effect. Toxic waste dumps are still being cleaned up. But most importantly, what happened is before that, chemical companies like Hooker Chemical literally would just find any hole in the ground and dump their wastes there. Sometimes they would buy vacant lots, dig them out, dump their waste there, cover them up, and then sell the vacant lots. It was really no method, no respect for the environment, no clue that, hey, these wastes are going to leak out of there and they're going to get into streams, they're going to get into people's yards and people's bodies, and they're going to kill people. So that changed forever after, well, I should say that changed after Love Canal. Donald Trump is trying to bring it back. Literally, he's trying to remove all those laws and regulations that were put in place because of Love Canal. We're not there yet. He hasn't managed to undo the 40 years of environmental things yet, but he's working as hard as he can at it. And if you live near something that's toxic, like a chemical factory or a refinery, listen very carefully to this interview with Lois Gibbs, because what she has to say might help you, and it might help save you and your family from health problems down the road. So without further ado, Russell, can we go to the interview?
Gibbs, thank you
okay.
so much for being on Foraging Future.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yep, our pleasure. Yes, Lois, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this presidential election cycle, and I want to go back 40 years and compare it to the 1980 election cycle, when, well, in large part because of the activities of you and your people that you worked with, things like toxic waste dumps had become a presidential issue, that it actually caught the national attention and was part of the presidential debate. So from your perspective, how would you compare the 2020 election to the 1980 election in terms of issues like that?
Well, I think it's a big issue, or will be a big issue in this election. You know, there's been so much going on with the COVID-19. It's being a little disguised. But one of the things that I think has happened very similar to Love Canal is COVID-19, right? It is the great revealer. And what it's done is it's pulled back the curtain on the class divide, the lack of justice for people who are black and brown and poor. And you know, when you look at what's happening in the South and across the country, a lot of communities of color, of low wealth, are outraged and calling on their elected officials to change a number of things, including during this pandemic. The EPA said, well, we're not going to monitor industry and we are not going to enforce our environmental laws. In the communities across the country that are hardest hit by pollution is the same communities that are dying from COVID-19. The black, the brown, the poor, the Native Americans. And so in the same manner in which there is a crisis, because there were many crises in 1980. There was the Cuban crisis, it was this thing, it was that thing, but you know, there was many crises. This one has really revealed where the White House stands, where the presently elected people stand, and what we need to do. And I think we saw that actually in Wisconsin, where, you know, the electeds were saying, we don't care if you die. And it's the same as toxic, COVID-19 toxics, it's, you know, kind of similar. And in Wisconsin, they said, we don't care about this. You're going to go to the poll and you're going to risk your life to vote. And the Wisconsin folks were furious, yet they did go out and they did vote and they did risk their lives, right? And they overturned that particular judge that was really the target of this, because they were so angry that they couldn't vote from home, or they couldn't delay the voting for another month or two, or any of the other alternatives. And so I think there is a similarity. It's not necessarily toxic as COVID-19, but COVID-19 has revealed the fact that low-income families, people of color, communities of color, live next to these refineries, these chemical plants. They are being exposed more. They are already predisposed with respiratory disease as a result, and the lack of health care and access to hospitals and other things, that they are dying at a much higher rate than white folk who do not live by the industry. So I think there is this, comparable thing happening today that's going to express itself in the 2020 elections.
Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing you might think that the decision by a governor of Georgia, a state which has a very large African American population, it might not be a coincidence that a state like that one is already opening the state back up and ignoring the COVID restrictions, even the ones put forward by the federal government.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. And I've done a lot of work in Georgia. In fact, we used to have a field office there. And when you look at where are people sick, where are people dying in Georgia, you're really talking about places like Savannah, Georgia. It has all the paper mills that put this stuff out in the air. People who have respiratory distress as a result of the pollution, asthma, COPD, or whatever. And yeah, I mean, I just think it's terrible, and Georgia's not alone. There's many of the red states that are following. The thing that was interesting about Georgia that I saw on the news recently is that when they opened it yesterday, there was a lot of people in cars with signs saying, "Stay at home, don't open these things, don't do this." And I think there's an equal amount of people protesting as there are people going to the barber shops or the nail salons or whatever it is that folks are feeling like they have to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, it may even be more people are still taking the disease seriously and still trying to stay home. But one of the things you touched on there, though, is something we like to emphasize on For a Green Future, and that is sort of the synergistic effects of all these environmental factors. And so you, over the years, have, I guess, gotten a lot of experience with the way things like pollution from toxic waste dumps exacerbates other problems and other diseases and makes illness more likely.
Yeah, that's really true. I mean, we are seeing the illnesses across the country are not a whole lot different than they were back in Love Canal days. In Love Canal days, we had over 50% of our children were born with birth defects. And so, that's a huge number. And then you go to different places, you see that same thing happening. You take Detroit, for example, which is a hotbed for the COVID-19, but it's also a hotbed for pollution. So when you look at Michigan, you see the zip code there, which is 48217 in Detroit, is the most polluted zip code in the state of Michigan. This is where Marathon is and a number of, I think it's like 32 other industries. And when you look at the population there, most of the population is black or brown. There is white as well, all of which are low income, and they have health deserts, we call them. There's no health care. Like their health care is the emergency room. They don't have insurance, so they can't have a regular doctor and go to like you and I, who are much more privileged, can do. And so these folks are getting sick, and right now they're really in a tough place because Marathon's not being monitored. It's not being enforced. The folks in Detroit are breathing in this stuff, and they have respiratory disease. There's statistics on how many people, and I don't have them at my fingertips here, but how many people in Detroit, Michigan, in this particular zip code, 48217, who have respiratory disease. And this is, COVID-19 is a respiratory virus, and folks are dying left and right. I mean, literally, you can talk to anybody in that zip code, and they know 2 or 3 people who have died, and they know a number of other people who are sick, really, really sick. And so part of the problem is not just COVID-19. Part of the problem is that the way our regulatory system works is we look at a single release pipe into the air, for example, and a single chemical. So out of that pipe, if you're releasing benzene, you can only release X amount of benzene, some number that some regulatory guy calculated that it would disperse, it wouldn't create a huge health problem. The problem with that is if we all lived in the desert and there was one pipe and one little thing of benzene, we would all be probably okay. We certainly wouldn't be dying at the rate they are in Detroit, Michigan. However, that's not the way the real world works. So they have these like laboratory models and decision making on these pipes and these permits. But essentially each one of these pipes releases more than a single chemical, multiple chemicals that go into the air, and people are exposed to multiple chemicals. So what does that mean? No one even knows. We know what benzene does. We know what this chemical does or that chemical does. We don't know what happens when you're exposed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to multiple low-level chemicals that accumulate and become a high level of a toxic soup that you're breathing. There's no studies of that. We don't understand it. What we do know is that people who live around these type of facilities have more cancer, have more respiratory disease, have more reproductive disease. And so the way our system is established and the way we regulate these chemicals is totally wrong, because we cannot do it chemical by chemical, pipeline by pipeline, because in some of these facilities, there's one in New Jersey, Deepwater, New Jersey. The gentleman from the facility said, Lois, I don't know what you're doing out here. Why are you protesting this new permit? There are 1,300 pipes that we're releasing chemicals from. What is one more?
Wow. Yeah, that's an amazing attitude. And listening to your talk, it kind of touches on a point I wanted to go over with you, and that is when you started working on the Love Canal situation, you weren't a biologist, you weren't a chemist, and neither were the friends and neighbors that you were working with, but you all educated yourselves on the issue. You did research and you learned the science. Now, one contrast with today, I was just this morning listening to C-SPAN, and they were talking about opening up states because of COVID, and I heard a woman call in who wanted to open her state up immediately, and she said, well, this is a case of science versus common sense. Like, common sense would be open up the state while the science is saying close it, and she's choosing, quote-unquote, common sense. What do you say to people that have that kind of attitude today? I mean, you guys confronted science, you sort of mastered science and made it your ally in the fight against the chemicals that were poisoning your community. But what do you say to people who just reject science altogether?
Well, she's not the only one. Our president at this moment also rejects science. In case you haven't watched some of his briefings, they are pretty pathetic.
Yeah.
Suggesting people drink Clorox or something like that. I mean, it's just crazy. Well, there are people that's the thing about the United States of America. We're all free to say and do what we want to do, but it's common sense will tell you not to open the state, and the science will say it too, right? Common sense says at least a little bit of science we know about COVID-19, and we don't know a lot, but the common sense will tell you that we shouldn't be coming together in groups of people. We shouldn't be opening things. It's spread, and we're not sure exactly how it spreads, but we have some good ideas. Common sense would say, let's figure out how to stay home. Let's figure out how to help folks. And, that's the common sense. She's just confused. We should not be opening the states at this level. I mean, the number of virus incidence is still climbing. It's decreasing in New York, but remember, New York was one of the first places, and it's now spreading across the country. But I understand some people wanting it open, and here's where it really becomes very hard. If you live from hand to mouth, and most of the people in these toxic communities do, by the way, they're the service industry people who people have just now realized they're actually essential employees. Imagine that. But there are people that work in the drugstore or the dry cleaners or drive trucks or do construction, and these folks don't have savings. They live from paycheck to paycheck, and when you don't get a paycheck for a month, and that's why you're seeing all of these lines of people who are, for the first time in their life, looking for food to feed their family. Because so much of America, when we talk about the 1%, so much of America is in that 99%. And they don't have the ability to go to their savings, to, get money from somebody else, a relative, a friend, to feed their families. And this is just, so they're saying, open it up because I want to feed my family. Some of them are feeling that way, and I get that. I don't think we should open it up. I think we should figure out a way to feed Americans who need food because of the economy being, temporarily stalled. But I don't think we should open it up for any good reason at this point. At least for another 30 days.
Okay. So you don't see any conflict between science and common sense. That's good. I wanted to talk to you, in the time since Love Canal, since the 1980 election, you have never stopped working for the environment, and I wanted to talk a little bit about your organization, the Center for Health and Environmental Justice, also called CHEJ. So what do you folks do, and what should people know about what you folks at CHEJ do?
Well, we're a national organization, and what we do is we assist community groups all across the country. So we essentially face the field, is how I like to put it, as opposed to facing the White House or the State House. So folks come to us and say, we have an incinerator, we have a dump, we live in this particular zip code, and it's really nasty here. Can you help us figure out what to do? And so we have a number of things that we offer. One, we have a toxicologist on staff who will help to explain to folks what these chemicals are that they may have in their water or their air, what these levels mean, whether a cleanup plan or a permit is a good idea or a bad idea, and comments people should make. So we have some science folks who can just take the science and really make it layperson friendly so that folks can understand it and then make a decision whether they strongly support or oppose what's being suggested in their neighborhood. The other thing we do is we have an organizing staff, and the organizing staff says, well, how do you want to fight this, so what do you want instead? If you don't want this landfill, what do you want to do? How are you going to fight it? Who's the decision maker? So, help them figure out the decision makers, a strategic plan, and then ways to implement that strategic plan in a thoughtful and strategic way. And so we really help communities, and then we bring communities together to share with one another not only their stories, but their learnings and their strategies and their ideas, and it's really quite exciting. So we've been doing this for 38 years, a long time after Love Canal, and we'll continue. We have a number of campaigns. One of the campaigns, interesting enough, that we started just before the pandemic was No More Sacrifice Zones. And No More Sacrifice Zones is really looking at communities that are impacted by multiple complex industrial releases into the air, and so we're specifically looking at air, and the cancer rate and the respiratory disease rate. And if people have a high rate of cancer and respiratory disease, we're going to those communities, we're having community meetings to say, what can we do collectively at a federal level? A federal level because it's a federal government that actually really gives permits for various air emissions through EPA. What can we do? What should this look like? What do you need at the ground? So we are going to put together the blueprint for a policy that we hope someone will introduce in 2021. So that's one of our campaigns that we've begun, which is really just bringing people together who have similar problems to come up and collectively from the grassroots come up with the solutions to those problems, and then try to get somebody on the Hill to sponsor that and move it forward and make it law.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. So you're saying, so if somebody is faced in, let's say in our listening audience has a dump or a pollutant, something that's going on that's affecting their community nearby, and they just don't know what to do, how to start fighting it or how to start improving things in their area, they could contact you and you could give them some advice on how to do that.
Absolutely. We can help folks figure out how to do it. We're not going to do it for them, but we will give them the tools. We can come to the community and, sit face to face with them and say, okay, in their living room with their core group, which is usually 5 or 10 people, how do you get 100 people to show up at your next meeting and really help them, both scientifically and organizing. Okay,
that's great. Well, I have to say, Lois, I've long been an admirer. I grew up in Western New York. My family grew up in Elba. You probably know where that is, just north of Batavia area. And I watched your organization over the years, and I watched what went on at Love Canal 40 years ago. And I think the big lesson there is that ordinary, quote unquote, ordinary people, that we can make a difference when we start working on these problems, that we don't have to, that we shouldn't just rely on leaders to fix things for us. And so I have to say I've always admired that about you and the attitude of your organization.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's really true. I mean, I think one of the things Love Canal has shown is that democracy works if people participate. You have to participate. If you want to change the world, you have to get up off the sofa and you have to go to a meeting or you have to do something. And we brought the President of the United States to Niagara Falls to stand on stage and give the community all the things that they needed to be whole. And we can do that at a federal level with the President. We can do it at a state level with our governors and our local legislators. We just need to do it.
Right. Yeah, and I always think that there's a direct correlation between how strong a democracy is and how well a government takes care of the environment. Because it seems to me, looking around the world, that the countries that have very strong environments and have a lot of civic participation in very strong democracies too. And I think that's an important lesson.
Yep.
All right. Well, Lois, thank you so much for this interview. Hopefully, maybe we can have you on in the future, but it's been a pleasure. Thanks for. Oh, and where can people go to find out about CHEJ?
So they can go to our website, which is chej.org, www.chej.org, and they can plug in through there. And we have various campaigns. You should take a walk through our website and see if there's something there that might fit what you're doing or what you would like to do. And we'd be happy to help you plug you into somebody who's already working, not too far from where you live, or we can work with you directly on something that's in your neighborhood.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, and there we go. This is
wow. You sound really cool.
Oh, do
you got an echo effect, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, one of the best things about doing this show is that I've been able to talk to and interview people that I have admired for years, and it's just been wonderful. Lois Gibbs, I've always wanted to sit down and have a chat with her, and thanks to all of you listeners, I was able to do that because I was able to bring her on the show. So, inspiring. What did you think, Rebecca?
She's amazing. She speaks science and English too.
I know. I consider her a citizen scientist, because she knows as much as a guy with a PhD, but she knows it not from the perspective of someone who's been, come up through the university system. She just knows it because she had to go out and learn it in order to get things done. And I just, tons of admiration. And she kind of reminds me of my favorite movie. I've never said this before, but my favorite movie of all times is Lorenzo's Oil. Did you ever watch that movie, Susan Sarandon?
Never seen it, no.
Oh, it's really a moving story, but it's a story about a woman who has a son with a genetic disease, and she and her husband, when this disease shows up when the kid gets to pre-adolescence, basically go in and lay people, they completely figure out this really complex biochemical science over what's causing the problem for their son, and they find a cure. It's just amazing. And you know, the scientists are all like, oh, we have to study this, we have to study that, and they just go and find a cure for their son. It was too late to fully benefit him because the disease had progressed so much. But literally thousands of other people who have that disease now are living normal, healthy lives because of this cure that this couple found. So I think America's kind of unique that way, that we're able to do that when we take the bull by the horns and just tackle these problems. And speaking of taking bulls by the horn, it's time for our Eco News segment. Oh, wait, actually, first, one other thing. We have to thank our sponsors, because they also make this show possible. And one of our sponsors is the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, they provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. And the Wood County Parks protects 20 natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways you can reach them and find out what's going on. One is you can call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Another is you can download their app. You just go to any app store and you look for WC Parks. And it's a free app, and it tells you what's going on at the parks. And you can do some fun things with it, like post pictures. I've got a picture that I just posted on there last week. And it's a beautiful little app. And then finally, of course, you can go to their website, wcparks.org. That's the Wood County Park District. And, of course, our show is also brought to you by our patrons. These are people who've gone on to patreon.com, and they just searched for A Green Future. And there a wonderful little Patreon page pops up, and they've agreed to make a small monthly donation. And those monthly donations really add up, and they really help keep this show going. So feel free to follow suit and just go to patreon.org and search for A Green Future. Okay, now back to the story about the bulls. We're at the section of the show where we like to talk about eco news, and I always like to have at least one upbeat story in eco news. It's so easy to just focus on all the negative stories, but there's a place in Canada. It's called the Wonusquin Heritage Park, and it's near Saskatoon. And what they have done there is they have repatriated a herd of bison into the park, and they got a bunch of bison in. They brought them in December, and the good news is that for the first time in 125 years, a bison was born in this area. And this is a natural area which is run by indigenous people, Native Americans, and they've been working to bring bison back into this heritage area for about 40 years. And so they finally succeeded, and the bison have made themselves at home. And actually, here's another silver lining: they've sort of been helped by the COVID virus, because the park is closed to visitors right now. So they've got the whole range, they got the feel of the territory, and they finally had their first calf born there. And that reminded me of another success story. Over in Alaska, they repatriated a bunch of wood bison at the Inoko Wildlife Refuge, and that's near Shagaluk. And so these things are happening. Bison are being repatriated. Wherever we make the effort to restore nature, usually we find nature can be restored because nature is very resilient. Sometimes after we've knocked nature back a lot, we need to give a little helping hand. We need to, import the bison. They're not just going to show up on their own. But once they do, they show up and they thrive. And so there's some nice news. Now, on to some not so nice news. Earth Day. As you know, last Wednesday was Earth Day, and it was a beautiful Earth Day. We went out and we were walking around on it, and it was, one of the cleanest Earth Days with the bluest skies. It was great. But also on Earth Day, the filmmaker Michael Moore released a film, his latest film. It was called Planet of the Humans. And I haven't seen it yet, and I would dearly like anyone who has seen it. Supposedly about almost 2 million people have seen it on YouTube. Anyone who has seen that movie, I'm asking you now, please call in at 866-240-1065 and tell us about it, because this movie has created immense controversy, and it kind of looks like maybe Michael Moore was more interested in generating controversy than in accuracy. Because what he does in this movie is he attacks wind power, he attacks solar power, he attacks geothermal energy. He basically says they're all just a big business conspiracy, and we shouldn't fall for it. And, he uses the fact that coal power is still the biggest source of energy to say, oh, your solar panels are being made with coal. And that's true. Coal is still way too big a part of the U.S.'s energy mix, but you have to use the energy you've got to make the transition over to the clean energy. That's what Germany is doing. That's what a lot of European countries are doing.
If we wait until we have enough solar panels to make the solar panels we need, then it'll never happen. We'll never have solar.
Right. Well, and what is happening, and what apparently Michael Moore has glossed over, is that a lot of these steps in the process of making wind turbines and solar panels are being used to make more
right.
Yeah, so like that first batch of solar panels that you put up on top of First Energy's factory in Perrysburg, yes, those were powered by coal, but now those panels are powering the factory, and that factory is making more panels, and those panels are made without any additional carbon being put into the air. So apparently this thing is full of hundreds of inaccurate statements. Yeah. That he's saying things like he's pointing to solar arrays and claiming that they're only producing about apparently a thousandth the power that they're actually producing.
Wow.
And it wasn't fact checked, and he just went to a lot of industry shills, a lot of fossil fuel industry shills, and just took whatever they said. And one of I haven't seen it yet, as I've said, so this is all hearsay on my part, but apparently this film is now being promoted by Rush Limbaugh and Breitbart and as this wonderful documentary, and so it kind of gives you I kind of get a sense that Michael Moore really doesn't really care about the issue, that he really more was interested in more Michael Moore and having people talking about him. Yeah, I went and saw Roger and Me at the Maumee Indoor Theater when it was first released. When his first big movie that got distributed, I went and saw it, and it was inspirational. But he's been drifting away from his roots pretty steadily, and I think with this movie, he's kind of broken away from reality, because I think he's gone
lost his moorings. He has.
That's right. So maybe we don't need more Michael Moore. Maybe we need less Michael Moore.
Nah.
So yeah, I intend to watch.
We should call him Michael Less.
Could be.
From now on, that's his new name.
I intend to watch it this week. I'll give a report on it next week, and I have invited him on the show.
Right.
He's probably going to ignore me. This show does reach up into Michigan where he lives. It's conceivable that he actually could be hearing this program. If so, I challenge him not to ignore my invitation. I would like to interview him, but
what you afraid of, Michael?
Not. Yeah, he's once you reach that multimillionaire stratum, you kind of tend to clump with the multimillionaires like Rush Limbaugh and Breitbart a little more than you do with the people like us who are. I have to admit here, I'm not a multimillionaire, so I'm just a guy with a radio show who's asking Michael Moore to come on it, and we'll see what he does. All right. Oh, we got to rush now. Today's 34th anniversary of Chernobyl, and once again, the pro-nukers are using it as a point of, even as Chernobyl's burning from forest fires and spreading radiation around, they're using it as a source of disinformation when all the studies of Chernobyl show that this is actually the linear no-threshold model, that is that any amount of nuclear radiation is harmful, is being proved over and over again in study after study at Chernobyl. So don't fall for their propaganda. All right, that's it for news, and we just have time for the letter from the future.
I was wondering.
Yes, just have time for it.
All right.
Dear great-great-grandpa, isn't it funny how life keeps going on? Over the last few weeks, I've had these huge, terrible things happen in my life. I'm still completely hairless. I'm still about 30 pounds underweight. I still start crying whenever I think about the baby I lost. But one by one, bits of ordinary life are creeping in. I guess it's a sign that I'm getting better, that I'm noticing these things. I've been spending a lot of time in the hologram booth, catching up with friends and family that I haven't seen in years sometimes. One of my friends from college, Sharon, is pregnant. She called out of concern for me, but she ended up talking about almost the whole time about her baby that's due in a month. I didn't say more than 10 words for the whole call, but I didn't mind. Somehow that call did more to lift my spirits than any other. My brother Sam has actually made the trip to see me. He's been having hard times since returning from Mars. He really loved Bill Ryderson, and his death really hit him hard. He's also being shunned by the other returned colonists because of his association with me. Many of them still blame me for the catastrophe there, even though studies are showing that the dry rot that destroyed the colony domes had actually been going on for years before I got there. Michael is still in a coma, though the doctors are cautiously optimistic now that he will survive. The big question is how much of that brilliant mind of his survived the assault of the gamma radiation. I'm living in an isolation room in a hospital in Zapoliarny that was built just for this purpose. It's large enough to accommodate all the people working at the drill site, just in case of a massive radiation release. I know it sounds gruesome, but I can tell that on some level the doctors and nurses are happy to have someone to take care of. That's about all I can do for now, GGG. Let other people take care of me. But it looks like I will be getting better. Love, Marie I.
Aw.
Yeah, so some progress there, and it's just a case of unintended consequences. We produce nuclear waste today. 300 years from now, it's going to hurt people. So,
but predictable. They're predictable consequences.
True. I mean, yeah, if you make a batch of poison and you don't have any way to dispose of it or take care of it, I mean, you can sort of predict eventually this is going to poison someone or something. So, but we are going to take care of it. We're going to figure things out. We're going to get better. We're going to overcome the naysayers like Michael Moore and have ourselves a green future. And I think that this show is a step in that direction. That's why we're putting on For a Green Future. And please consider becoming a patron. Please consider helping to make that green future a reality. All right, we're just about at the end of the show. Rebecca, do you have any observations or anything you wanted to talk about for a minute or so here?
I don't know. I looked into while I heard about the interview last night. I looked into the history of Love Canal, and wow, the early history is just crazy. There was this guy named William Love who was a entrepreneur for the railroad, apparently, and he had these big fancy plans for a model community on the shores of Lake Ontario, I believe it was. Yeah, Lake Ontario in the northeast corner of Niagara. And the purpose of the canal was originally going to be a shipping bypass for the Niagara River. So there was that. There were some kind of fancy plans involving hydroelectricity.
Right, the Niagara River is the river that connects Lake Erie to Lake Ontario. And that's the river that Niagara Falls is on. And yes.
Boats can't go over that. They really cannot.
No, the ones
it
that
doesn't
tried, it's not ended well, yeah.
No,
it's not an experiment you need to repeat going over Niagara Falls in a boat. But yeah, it is the source of hydroelectricity. It's one of the largest sources of hydroelectricity in the world. And actually, it's an example of sustainable development, because right from the beginning, people realized we can't injure the falls, we can't destroy this natural beauty just to make electricity. So the agreement between U.S. and Canada ensures that there's always enough water to go over the falls, that's not usurped by the electrical generation. So you can do both.
And that's what happened to his canal. They said he couldn't divert the water.
Right. Yeah. And so
from the Niagara.
Right. So sorry about that abrupt ending on the live broadcast. Rebecca and I didn't have the feed in our ears. We couldn't hear that the theme song was playing, so we just kept talking till we ran out of time. But I did want to thank you all for listening, and we'll be back next week with another episode of For a Green Future. This is Joe DeMare signing off.